Do you think the side with the better weapons wins the war? German engineers thought so too. They created the Tiger, a masterpiece where every detail was measured down to the micron, and the crew felt like they were riding in a limousine. They laughed at Soviet tanks, calling them tractors with leaky armor. But why then did those flawless German machines end up rusting on the roadsides, while the rough, ugly, hastily welded T-34s rolled into Berlin? In this video, we will reveal the terrifying mathematics of war that textbooks stay silent about. You will learn why a leaky hatch is better than an airtight one, how zombie tanks returned from the dead 3 times over, and why German quality became their death sentence. Watch to the end. This answer will overturn your understanding of victory. August 1941. The dust of the Ukrainian steppe stands like a solid wall, clogging filters, settling on face armor, gritting between teeth.
The roar of tracks drowns out all sounds of the living world. This is not just an offensive. This is the work of a perfectly tuned mechanism. The German war machine grinds through space and time with the precision of a Swiss chronometer. In the gunners' sights are burning grain elevators and the abandoned hulks of Soviet light tanks, the BT-7, which didn't even have time to turn their turrets. For the Wehrmacht, the war has turned into a logistical problem. The question is not, will we win, but how much fuel will it take to reach Moscow? Through officers' binoculars, panoramas of burning cities look like a progress report. The Donbass, the heart of Soviet industry, lies before them in the palm of their hand. Mines, blast furnaces, rolling mills, all of this is either already captured or will be captured in the next 48 hours. In General Halder's staff car, it smells of expensive tobacco, cologne, and confidence. Here, in a silence broken only by the rustle of maps and the clatter of typewriters, the illusion of absolute triumph is being forged. The chief of the General Staff of the Army makes an entry in his diary. The handwriting is even, the pressure firm. The meaning of the entry is simple. The campaign against Russia has been won in 2 weeks. This is not boasting. This is a conclusion based on flawless German logic. This logic is ironclad. German analysts have calculated everything. They know the capacity of Soviet railroads. They know the reserves of anthracite. They know the amount of alloying additives for armor steel. The conclusion is unambiguous. The Soviet Union is a colossus with feet of clay, and those legs have already been broken. The loss of the Donetsk coal basin and the metallurgy of the South means not just a defeat in battle. It means industrial death. Without coal, there will be no steel. Without steel, there will be no tanks. The mathematics of war is implacable. Reich intelligence places a report on the table. The numbers are dry as a verdict. The industrial potential of the Soviets is destroyed. The main tank factories in Kharkov and Leningrad are within range of Luftwaffe bombers or are already under threat of capture. According to calculations by the Foreign Armies East Department, the Russians are capable of producing no more than 100 tanks a month. 100 machines for a front stretching 3,000 kilometers. This is a statistical error. This is nothing. Somewhere near Uman, on the edge of a captured sunflower field, a commander's horch comes to a halt. A door opens. A black leather boot steps onto the dry, cracked earth. 2 Wehrmacht officers look at the horizon, obscured by black smoke. They feel no fear, only a slight fatigue from the endless road and dust. "Look at that smoke, Gunther." The senior officer removes his gloves, shaking gray dust from them. "That is their last chance burning."
"Intelligence reports they are trying to evacuate the machine tools," the second replies, taking out a cigarette case. "They say they are loading them right under artillery fire." "Barbarism," the first one chuckles. "Do they think they can take a factory and simply move it to Siberia? It's not a suitcase of laundry.
its foundations, furnaces, power grids. So these are just convulsions? Precisely. A pile of scrap metal. By winter, they will have only rifles and cavalry left. We are fighting a corpse that simply forgot to lie down in its grave. The click of the lighter sounds louder than the cannonade in the distance. For these people, the war has already moved into the cleanup phase. They sincerely believe that a factory is a building, that industry is walls. For them, raised in a culture where a workshop is built over years, where every machine has its place, measured to the millimeter, it is impossible to imagine otherwise. They do not understand that for their enemy, the factory has ceased to be a geographical point. Meanwhile, on the maps in Berlin, the red arrows of the Wehrmacht slice through the Soviet defense like a scalpel through rotten flesh. Encirclements near Kiev, pockets near Vyazma, millions of prisoners, mountains of captured weapons. Photographs from the front confirmed the analysts were right. Smashed columns, tanks abandoned on the roadside with open hatches. It seems the steel spine of the Red Army has been snapped. German engineers arriving in captured cities look at Soviet workshops with disgust. Primitive is the verdict after inspecting a foundry in Dnipropetrovsk. Rough casting, low production culture, lack of finishing. They laugh. They see weakness in this roughness. It seems to them that equipment made so carelessly cannot fight against the masterpieces of Krupp and Henschel. A German tank is a work of art, where every part is fitted by hand, where the transmission works smoothly, like in a limousine, where the crew feels comfortable. The Russian tank, in their eyes, is a tractor plated with boiler iron. No one in the general staff asks the question, what if this roughness is not a bug, but a feature? What if the lack of finishing is a way to make not 100, but 1,000 machines? These questions drown in the champagne of victory reports. Overconfidence becomes a drug. It blinds. Generals see only what they want to see, a map on which Moscow is less than a month's journey away. The stereotype of the Russian barbarian plays a cruel joke on them. They believe that the complex logistics of evacuation are impossible for a people who, in their opinion, do not even know how to build normal roads. They do not take into account the factor of desperation, the factor that turns physics into psychology and logistics into a religion of survival. While a German master in Essen wipes an optical sight with a rag, checking a flowchart where 40 minutes are allotted for one operation, something is happening in the East that does not fit into the Reich's standards. There, behind the front line, which the Germans consider the finish line, movement begins. But not of tank wedges. This is the movement of trains. "How many tanks do they have left?" asks a general at a meeting, pointing a pointer at the map of the Urals. "According to our data, reserves are exhausted, mein General. Production has stopped due to the loss of major capacities. They are throwing training vehicles into battle." "Excellent. That means by Christmas we will be drinking schnapps in warm apartments." Laughter rings out in the office. The laughter of people who have signed their own death warrant, but do not yet know it. They look at the map, but see only territory. They do not hear the hum that is already beginning to rise in the depths of the continent. A hum not of motors, but of thousands of wheel pairs clattering on rail joints. German strategy was built on blitzkrieg, lightning war, strike, breakthrough, encirclement, victory. All resources were calculated for a short sprint. Tanks, trucks, planes, everything was created for one rapid attack. No one prepared the Reich's industry for a marathon of attrition. Why? After all, the enemy is already defeated. An empire built on order and calculation collided with chaos, which it mistook for weakness. But in this chaos, a new, terrifying structure was being born. A structure where human life is worth nothing, but where time is worth more than gold. The Germans counted divisions. The Russians began counting hours. The error in calculations was not in the numbers. The error was in the philosophy. Berlin was sure that by destroying the walls of the factories, it had killed production. They did not understand the main thing. A factory is not walls. A factory is people and machines. And as long as even one engineer is alive, and even one shaft is turning, the war is not over. The illusion of victory was sweet. It was lulling. It made them relax. Why strain the rear, switch the economy to total war footing, if the Russian bear is already bleeding out and about to give up the ghost? The German genius, blinded by its own brilliance, did not notice how something unparalleled in the history of warfare began to rise from the bloody dust and chaos. The metal held, but did the people hold? And here the real race begins. A race in which a second of downtime equals death, and an extra welding seam equals a crime. October 1941. Near Mtsensk, the earth turns into a greasy, squelching black mass. The famous Russian Rasputitsa, German columns, which just yesterday were flying forward with the speed of express trains, come to a halt. The narrow tracks of the Panzer IIIs and IVs helplessly knead the mud. Elegant German equipment, created for European highways, drowns. Transmissions howl from overload. Drivers curse this country, this mud, and this climate. But the real nightmare awaits them not under the tracks. It appears from the fog. The silhouette is unfamiliar, low, predatory, with unnaturally sloped edges. No right angles, customary for the German school of design. It is the T-34, a machine whose existence German intelligence denied and logic considered impossible. For Wehrmacht crews, this meeting becomes the first collision with reality, where their technical superiority is nullified by physics. The commander of a German tank looks through the vision block. Distance, 600 meters. An ideal position for a shot. His 50mm cannon should stitch right through this Russian tin can. "Fire!" he rasps into the throat microphone. Shot. Thunder. The shell flies to the target. The German gunner is used to seeing the enemy turret turn into a torch after such a hit. But the impossible happens. A shower of sparks. The shell strikes the frontal armor of the T-34 and screams off into the sky. Ricochet. "Hit!" yells the gunner. "But it's not burning!" "Again! Armor piercing! Faster!" This is the essence of the technical revolution brought on tracks by designers Koshkin and Morozov. Sloped armor. A genius idea in its simplicity. A sheet of steel only 45mm thick, set at an angle of 60 degrees, turns into 90mm of metal for a flying shell, plus the probability of slipping. The German slug cannot bite into the smooth, slanted surface. Kinetic energy goes into the air. The T-34 turns its turret, slowly with the heavy hum of an electric motor. Its muzzle looks straight into the soul of the German crew. 76mm. A caliber that was previously used by artillery is now on a medium tank. For the German boxes, with their vertical armor, this is a death sentence. The shot of the Soviet tank sounds different, duller, more powerful. The high explosive shell strikes the turret of the Panzer. The explosion tears off hatches, concusses the crew, rips through thin bulkheads. The German machine is not just hit, it is gutted by a sledgehammer blow. "Back! Full reverse!" screams the German commander, realizing that his gun is a child's toy against this monster. But the Panzer does not move. It spins its tracks. The ground pressure of the German machine is too high. It is a hostage of its own weight and narrow base. The T-34, however, moves through the same mud like a cutter through water. Wide tracks, large lugs. The powerful V2 diesel roars with a bass voice, spitting out black smoke. Diesel. Another difference that became fatal for the Panzerwaffe. German tanks run on gasoline. One lucky hit in the engine compartment, one spark, and gasoline vapors turn the fighting compartment into a crematorium in seconds. Wehrmacht tankers burn alive. The Soviet diesel runs on diesel fuel. It is hard to ignite. Even a punctured tank is not always death. It is a chance to survive and continue the fight. There is panic on German frequencies. "Shells are bouncing off! We can't penetrate them! They are some kind of devils! They are coming right at us!" General Guderian would later write in his diary, "The superiority of the T-34 was overwhelming. Our cannons could only penetrate it from behind and from pistol range. It was a shock, a technological knockout. A nation of engineers, proud of their mechanisms, suddenly discovered they had been outplayed. And outplayed not through complexity, but through crude, effective utilitarianism." German experts feverishly inspect the first captured specimen. They do not believe their eyes. "Look at the transmission, Hans. It's the last century." An engineer in dirty overalls points a finger. "Gears are shifted with a sledgehammer. Visibility is terrible. The commander works as the gunner, too. Ergonomics are absent." "But look at the armor," another replies quietly, running his hand over the cold, rough slope of the turret. "It is solid, cast. And this engine, aluminum block, 400 horsepower." They see a paradox. The machine is made roughly, weld seams are not cleaned, inside it is cramped and uncomfortable. But as a combat unit, it is the absolute weapon. The T-34 was not created for parades. It was not created for comfort. It was created to live on the battlefield exactly as long as needed for one effective shot. It is a projectile weighing 30 tons. The duel in the autumn steppe ends with the destruction of the German company. Crosses on the sides are burning. Black smoke from gasoline fires spreads along the ground. The T-34 drives past the burning hulk of a 3. The clanking of its tracks is the sound of a new time. The time of elegant duels has passed. The era of mass destruction of equipment has arrived. The German command is in shock. All plans for the summer campaign, all calculations of armor penetration go into the wastebasket. They need a new weapon. They need an answer, urgently. The Tiger and Panther will appear in blueprints as a reaction to this fear, as an attempt to copy the sloped armor, but do it the German way. Thicker, more complex, higher quality. But while new monsters are being drawn in Berlin, on the front, Wehrmacht soldiers experience animal terror before the T-34. They call it Mickey Mouse for the characteristic shape of the two open hatches on the turret, resembling ears. But there is no laughter in this nickname, only nervous hysteria. When these ears rise over a hill, the German infantry knows their anti-tank knockers are useless. The tank has ceased to be just a support vehicle. It has become the king of the battlefield. And this king spoke Russian, growled with diesel exhaust, and was not afraid of mud. The Germans realized that quality-wise they had lost this round. Their hope remained only on quantity, on the fact that there are few Russian tanks, that the factories are destroyed, that there is nowhere for these steel monsters to come from anymore. But they were wrong again. The tank they met in the field was only the first drop of an approaching storm. While the first panzers were burning out on the front, far in the rear, something more terrifying than any tank attack was happening. Trains with equipment were already approaching empty, snow-covered lots. Logistics was preparing its counterstrike. Iron had passed the test of battle. Now the human being had to pass the test. Ahead was the frozen hell of the Urals. November 1941. The railroad tracks of the Soviet Union groan from the weight. What is happening now, German intelligence calls flight, but it is not flight. It is the greatest logistical operation in history to transplant industrial organs. Whole factories are torn from their settled places, ripped out by the roots from concrete foundations, and loaded onto open flat cars. Kharkov Locomotive Factory number 183, the cradle of tank building. In peacetime, its dismantling would have taken months of planning and years of work. Now the engineers have days. Cables are not disconnected, they are chopped with axes. Machines are not disassembled, they are ripped from anchors with winches. In the chaos of loading, under the wail of air raid sirens, everything flies into the train cars. Unique presses, stocks of alloy steel, archives of blueprints, and people. Thousands of people. Trains leave for the east in a continuous stream. The interval between trains is minutes. Locomotives work at the limit, pulling weight exceeding all standards. On open flat cars, covered only by tarps, ride lathes. Next to them, in boxcars where the temperature is barely above zero, ride the turners. They sleep sitting up, pressed against each other to preserve warmth. Many of them will never see their homes again. Their new address is City N, a dot on the map of the Urals, where for now there is only forest and snow. Nizhny Tagil, December. The air temperature drops to -40 degrees. The air here is so dense and icy that it hurts to breathe. It burns the lungs with every breath. In this white desert, the train stops. People jump out of the cars into waist-deep snowdrifts. Around them, no workshops, no cranes, no housing. Only taiga and earth frozen to stone hardness. The task set before the factory director sounds like the raving of a madman. Start tank production in 2 weeks. Not build a factory, but start releasing products. German planners, seeing these conditions, would have written a report on the impossibility of fulfilling the task. Soviet engineers simply silently pick up crowbars. Unloading is done by hand. Multi-ton machine beds are dragged off flat cars along log ramps. Ropes snap from tension. People slip, fall, but get up. If a machine falls into the snow, it will have to be lifted by hand, and that is hellish labor. Lubricant in bearings freezes and turns into stone. To turn a shaft, fires must be lit right under the metal belly of the machine. In these conditions, metal changes its properties. Steel becomes brittle as glass. From a blow with a sledgehammer, an alloyed track pin can shatter into shards. Touching frozen iron with a bare hand means an instant burn. Skin remains on the metal. People work in padded mittens, which quickly soak with oil and harden in the cold, turning into blocks of ice. In the middle of a snowy field, under the open sky, a site is cleared. Directly on the frozen ground, without a foundation, machines are placed. Electricians run cables right through the snow, hanging them on temporary poles. "Current! Give us current!" screams the foreman, shouting over the wind. The first machine comes to life. The snow around it begins to melt from the heat of the running motor, turning into dirty slush. A turner stands at the spindle. Snow falls on him from above. Shavings flying from under the cutter hiss as they fall into a snowdrift. It looks surreal. There is no factory. There are no walls. There is no roof. But production is already underway. Walls will start to be erected later, around the already working people. Masons will lay bricks standing on scaffolding, while below, in the gloom illuminated only by portable lamps, turret rings will be machined. Factory director Yuri Maksarev walks through this ghost construction site. His face is grey from lack of sleep, his eyes inflamed. The chief power engineer runs up to him, shivering from cold in a thin greatcoat.
Yuri Evgenyevich, we can't connect the presses. The cable won't hold. The insulation is cracking in the cold. We'll burn out the substation.
Maksarev stops. He looks at the engineer with a heavy, unblinking gaze.
If the first hull doesn't come out of the gates tomorrow, the Germans won't shoot us. Our conscience will shoot us. Plug it in directly. If it burns out, we'll fix it. But the people will endure. Tanks cannot wait. Execute. And they execute. This is not labor heroism in the understanding of poster propaganda. This is a bestial desire to survive. People understand. What they are doing here, in this icy hell, is the only thing separating their families at the front from death. Fatigue disappears, dissolving in the cold. Only a mechanical rhythm remains. Take a blank, secure it, machine it, remove it, repeat. A shift lasts 12, 14, 16 hours. The concept of a workday disappears. There is only a shift and a short sleep in a barracks where 80 people share 40 bunks. They sleep in turns. Food is a slop of frozen potatoes and a ration of bread that becomes hard as a brick in the frost. Women and teenagers replace men who have gone to the front. A 14-year-old boy stands at a milling machine. He is too short. He cannot reach the control handles. They put a wooden ammunition crate under his feet. Now he is part of the machine. His hands, small, with chilblains from the frost, confidently catch the required size with a micrometer. He does not cry. He has no strength for tears. He knows. The quota is 120 parts. If he doesn't do it, the tank won't go. In German headquarters, they are sure that evacuation is the end of Soviet industry. They believe that transported factories will start producing output in a year at minimum.
High-precision production cannot be set up in an open field, write Krupp experts. They are right. By the laws of the normal world, it cannot. But here, in the Urals, the laws of the normal world have been cancelled. Here, the law of wartime operates. The impossible must be done immediately. By January 1942, the first trains with Ural T-34s are already leaving for the west. These tanks are rough. On their armor, traces of careless welding done by frozen hands are visible. They are not painted. There is no time and no paint. And why bother if in winter they will become white from snow anyway, and in spring, gray from mud? But inside these rough machines beats a heart launched contrary to the laws of physics. The diesel roars, and this roar is the answer to German theorists. While in the warm workshops of Germany, masters verify gaps, in the Urals, under snowfall, at -40, a teenager hammers in a track pin with a sledgehammer, completing assembly. A logistical miracle has occurred. Factory number 183 didn't just move, it mutated. It shed everything superfluous, comfort, safety, warmth, walls, and turned into a pure function. A function of producing death for the enemy. The Urals became the steel heart of the country, and this heart began to pump armored blood with a rhythm that German intelligence could not even imagine. Snow continues to fall on the still warm, freshly welded turrets. The train sounds its whistle. Another batch of tanks leaves into the darkness. On the side of one of the machines, written in chalk, "For the Motherland," written by a trembling, cold child's hand. But the handwriting is firm. The duel moves to a new phase. Now, against German quality, plays Ural quantity, multiplied by icy fury. In the design bureaus of the Reich, sterile cleanliness reigns. Here, under the bright light of lamps,
perfection is born.
A German engineer is not just a technician. He is an artist working with metal. His philosophy is simple, and, it would seem, undeniable. The best weapon defeats the worst. Therefore, every assembly of the Tiger or Panther tank is designed as a masterpiece of precision mechanics. Tolerances are measured in microns. Gearbox gears undergo multi-stage grinding to ensure perfect meshing and silent operation. In the workshops of the Henschel Company, a master in a white coat takes a finished part in his hands. He puts on glasses, takes a magnifying glass, and slowly, lovingly inspects the surface. If he finds even one scratch, even one burr, the part will go to scrap. Quality is a religion. A German tank must be reliable, comfortable, and durable. It is calculated for years of operation. In this logic, there is only one flaw. It does not account for the reality of the Eastern Front. Thousands of kilometers from Essen, in a smoke-filled and cold office in Nizhny Tagil, chief designer Alexander Morozov looks at the blueprints of the T-34. Before him is not the task of creating an ideal tank. Before him is the task of creating a tank that can be assembled by the hands of yesterday's school children in one shift. Morozov takes a red pencil. With a sharp movement, he crosses out entire assemblies. "Remove it," he throws to the technologists. "This is superfluous. This is too complex." "But Alexander Alexandrovich, this will reduce the engine resource by 200 hours, the lead engineer objects, trying to save a complex filtration system. "A tank lives in battle for 3 attacks. That is a maximum of 40 hours. Why does it need a resource for 200? We don't need a perpetual motion machine for a corpse. Cut it." This is cruel arithmetic. But precisely this becomes the philosophy of Soviet tank building. Everything that does not affect the ability to drive and shoot is ruthlessly thrown out of the T-34 design. Minus 900 parts. 900 elements that needed to be cast, turned, hardened, and assembled simply vanish from the technological map. Instead of milling, stamping. Instead of bolted connections, rough welding. Instead of soft seats, canvas on a wooden frame. Abandonment of rubber tires on road wheels due to rubber shortage. Now the tank rattles when driving like a rock crusher. The crew goes deaf from the clanking of metal on metal. But the factory saves tons of scarce rubber and thousands of man-hours. A German master spends 4 hours polishing a shaft. A Soviet teenager in Nizhny Tagil doesn't even know what polishing is. He takes a blank, just cooled after forging, and shoves it into the machine. One pass of the cutter. Shavings as thick as a finger fall to the floor. Are the dimensions within tolerance? Within tolerance. Next. The surface of the part is rough, coarse, with scratches from the cutter. German quality control would faint. The Soviet military representative stamps it, accepted. In the welding shop, a real revolution is happening that the Germans overlooked. Manual welding requires qualification. A welder needs to be taught for years for the seam to be even and airtight. The USSR does not have years. It has days. Academician Peyton introduces automatic submerged arc welding. Now the process looks like this. A boy sets up armor plates, pours powder over the joint, and presses a button. The machine crawls along the seam itself. The arc is not visible. There are no splashes. The seam comes out rough, thick, looking like a scar, but it is monolithic. The penetration is so deep that the armor is more likely to crack in a new place than come apart at the seam. German engineers, studying captured tanks, will note with horror, these seams were not made by humans. This is machine work. They could not believe that the Russians had automated a process that in Germany was considered the pinnacle of craft art. A dialogue in the office of the factory's chief technologist grows into a shout. The shop chief throws a part on the table, a gearshift lever. It looks like a piece of rebar with a knob welded to it anyhow. "You want me to put this in a tank?" he yells. "It's a disgrace. Soldiers will rub their hands to blood." "Soldiers will burn in the tank if it doesn't leave the shop today," the technologist replies harshly, not raising his eyes from the manifest. "Does it perform the function? Does it engage the gear?" "It engages if you kick it." "Then we install it. They'll paint it in the unit. Next question." Here, in the rear, a fracturing of consciousness is taking place. Engineers of the old school, accustomed to production culture, are forced to kill the perfectionists within themselves. They learn to think in categories of necessary and sufficient. If a part can go unpainted, it is not painted. If a hatch cover can be stamped from a sheet rather than cast in a mold, it is stamped. The German approach is the creation of a complex mechanism from a multitude of ideal components. The Soviet approach is the creation of a single, rough system where the quality of an individual part does not matter. Only the final result matters, the shot. The T-34 turns into a Kalashnikov assault rifle on tracks. The clearances are huge, everything rattles and wobbles. But precisely these gaps allow the mechanism to work in mud, in dust, in frost, when the delicate German mechanism jams from a single grain of sand. A German workshop looks like an operating room. A Soviet workshop looks like the mouth of a volcano. Here, scale flies, smoke hangs, it smells of burnt oil and sweat. There is no place for aesthetics here. A tank rolling off the assembly line looks frightening. On the armor, traces of rolling. On the turret, casting irregularities looking like cellulite. Welding seams stick out in bumps. For the German eye, this is ugliness. It is an insult to engineering thought. "Look at this driver's hatch." A German trophy officer winces squeamishly, inspecting a knocked-out machine. "The gaps are such that a finger could fit through. Water pours inside during rain. Savages." He does not understand one thing. While his factory in Germany made one ideal, airtight hatch with rubber seals and a chrome handle, this savage factory in the Urals made 50 leaky hatches. In this war, quantity transitions into a new quality. The simplicity of the design allows for repairs right in the field. A broken transmission of a Tiger needs to be taken to a factory in Germany, or a special brigade with a crane must be called. A broken transmission of a T-34 can be rebuilt by the driver mechanic and a couple of soldiers in the woods, using a sledgehammer, a crowbar, and strong language. Soviet roughness turned out to be not a sign of backwardness, but the pinnacle of adaptation. It was the triumph of utilitarianism. The designers understood the terrible truth of war. A tank is a consumable item. It is a projectile. A projectile does not have to be beautiful. It must be deadly and cheap. Alexander Morozov puts down the pencil. The blueprint has become almost white from the changes introduced. Only the skeleton of the machine remains, nothing superfluous. The absolute minimalism of death. "To production," he says quietly. "Immediately." The time saved on these blueprints is converted into thousands of machines, and this time begins to tick not in favor of the Reich. The mathematics of war comes into its own, and its equations are solved not by the quality of steel, but by the quantity of hours. 30 days versus 180. This fraction will become a verdict. In the offices of Berlin, time flows differently. It is measured by changing of the guard, lunch breaks, and weekends. In the Reich, they believe that quality wins the war, and quality does not tolerate haste. The birth of a heavy Tiger tank is a sacred rite. It is a process stretched over half a year, 180 days. Imagine this cycle. A huge workshop of the Henschel factory. Silence, broken only by the whirring of power tools. The hull of the future giant stands on a slipway for weeks. Brigades of narrow specialists walk around it. Electricians install the most complex wiring, laying cables in neat bundles, marking every wire with a colored tag. Hydraulic engineers adjust the turret rotation system, achieving a smoothness of movement worthy of a clock mechanism. Masters install observation instruments, wiping optics with special chamois. Every weld is checked by X-ray. Every bolt is tightened with a torque wrench with precisely specified force. If the thread goes tight, the bolt is changed. This is not weapons production. This is the creation of an engineering monument. When the Tiger finally rolls out of the gates, it is perfect. It is ready to destroy. But while the Germans made this one tank, the calendar counted off 6 months. And now let's transport ourselves 4,000 kilometers to the east, to Nizhny Tagil. Here, time does not flow. It flies, burning up in the furnaces of open hearth ovens. There is no concept of a slipway here. Here, there is an assembly line. And this assembly line is a noose on the Wehrmacht's neck, which tightens with every meter the belt moves. While German masters practiced sorcery over one Tiger, the Soviet factory released 21 T-34s. The math is murderous. 1 against 21. This is not a ratio of losses. This is a ratio of speeds. The Soviet production cycle is compressed to 30 days. From a piece of ore to a shot on the proving ground, 1 month. This became possible not thanks to a miracle. There are no miracles in metallurgy. This is the result of the fiercest rationalization and superhuman strain. The factory switched to a flow method. The tank no longer stands in place, accumulating parts. It moves. It crawls through the shop like a carcass in a slaughterhouse, and at every meter, new organs are implanted into it. The conveyor does not stop for a second. It moves in jerks, setting the rhythm of life for thousands of people. Stopping the belt is an emergency, investigated as sabotage. Shift ended, the conveyor moves. Lunch, the conveyor moves. Air raid, the conveyor moves. People eat right at their workplaces, biting bread with oily hands, not taking their eyes off the part crawling past. In the shop, there is a hum that vibrates the floor. It is the voice of a giant organism digesting metal. Here, there is no individual responsibility for the whole tank. Here, everyone is a slave to their operation. You have 3 minutes to tighten 6 nuts on a road wheel. Didn't make it, the wheel left without nuts, and the defect will stop the whole line. You do not have the right not to make it. The shop chief walks along the assembly line. His boots clatter on metal shavings littering the floor. He stops near the foreman of the transmission section. The foreman's face is black with soot. Only the whites of his eyes and his teeth are visible. The plan for the shift is increased, the chief throws out, not raising his voice, but he is heard even through the roar. We need to give 5 more machines above schedule. The front is burning. The foreman spits on the floor. People are collapsing, Petrovich. 3rd shift without sleep. Look, Sidorov fell asleep standing up, almost got caught under the press. We aren't made of iron. People aren't made of iron. The chief agrees, looking at a tank hull floating past. But tanks are iron. If we don't meet the plan, the Germans will come here, and then we'll sleep forever. Get the people up, pour water on their faces, give them alcohol. I don't care how, but the machines must go out. And the machines go out. This is a race for survival, where the stopwatch is more terrifying than a machine gun. The labor intensity of manufacturing one T-34 decreased from 8,000 man-hours in 1941
to 3,000 in 1943. The Germans spent 200,000 man-hours on a Panther. Feel this abyss. While a German worker, whistling a Wagnerian motif, does one operation, a Soviet worker does 60. Quality?
No one talks about it in categories of good. They speak in categories of acceptable. The tank must drive 300 kilometers and fire 100 times. Anything beyond that is luxury. Engines that previously underwent run-in on stands for days now idle for a couple of hours. The cheapest oil is poured in. Instead of scarce bearings, plain bushings are installed. But precisely this primitive mathematics breaks the spine of German strategy. Wehrmacht generals planning operations proceed from classic norms of loss replacement. They think, we destroyed a Russian division, they will need 3 months to reform. They do not know that the factory in Tagil has already produced equipment for 2 new divisions while they were writing the report. Visualization of this flow is terrifying. Imagine the gates of the assembly shop. Every 30 minutes, a new tank bursts out of them, shrouded in blue diesel smoke. It is not yet past military acceptance. The paint of tactical numbers has not yet dried on it, and it is already driving onto a railroad flat car. A train is formed not in days, in hours. Flat cars stretch beyond the horizon. This is not a brook. It is a full-flowing river of steel. The Germans are fighting an army, while the USSR is fighting with a factory. The factory is a giant 3D printer that prints tanks faster than the Wehrmacht can reload its guns. In the office of the factory director hangs a graph. The red line of production crawls upward, almost vertically. This is the cardiogram of the war. Every peak on this graph is someone's sleepless night, someone's torn back, someone's heart attack at the machine. But the price has been paid. Time has compressed. 6 months against 1. Elegance against a wave. Custom goods against a mass product. The German engineering genius drove itself into a trap of perfectionism. They created the best gladiators in the world, but released them into the arena against locusts. A gladiator can kill 10, 20, 100 enemies. But when there are thousands of them, and they crawl from every crack, not stopping for a moment, the gladiator's sword grows dull. And in the Urals, the shift continues. The whistle blows, but no one leaves. The relief worker simply stands next to him, grabbing the handle of the machine, not stopping the rotation of the spindle. The work is passed like a baton. The warmth of one worker's hands is replaced by the warmth of another's. The metal must not cool down. Time must not stop. 30 days. 30 days to turn a piece of earth into a weapon of retribution. This race has already been won in the workshops. Now the results of this mathematics must be seen at the front. And when this avalanche of cheap, rough, but numerous steel reaches the front line, German aces will realize their skill means nothing anymore. Spring 1942. The steppe wind carries the smell of burning and overheated metal. Stalingrad. This name has not yet become a symbol of catastrophe for Germany, but the flywheel is already spinning. German generals look through binoculars at the buildings of the Stalingrad tractor factory. For them, this is simply target number 1 on the sector map, a fat black dot that needs to be erased with the eraser of artillery. They do not understand that they are looking not at a factory. They are looking into the barrel of a pistol held to their temple. Here, on the banks of the Volga, a fusion unique in the history of warfare takes place. The front line and the assembly line cease to exist as separate concepts. The factory fence is the front line. The workshop is the rear. The distance between the birth of a tank and its death shrinks to a few hundred meters. Inside the workshops of the STZ, there is an infernal roar. But this is not only the noise of machines. These are explosions of German mortar shells falling on the roof. The glass in the upper tiers has long been blown out. Glass shards crunch underfoot, mixed with steel shavings. But the conveyor crawls. It moves with the stubbornness of the doomed. Tanks coming off this belt look gruesome. There is no paint on them. There is no more time for the paint shop. The hulls shine with the naked, predatory gleam of raw steel, covered in places with red spots of scale. Welding seams are still smoking. If you place a hand on the armor, you can get a burn. This is not a metaphor. The metal is physically hot. The machine is born in a fever. The shop gates swing open. From the gloom, slicing through clouds of dust, bursts a T-34. It is without tactical numbers, without stars, just a piece of iron stuffed with explosives and fury. The crew jumps into the hatches on the move. The driver-mechanic, who has just received the machine, hasn't even had time to check the levers. His run-in is the first 5 minutes of battle. His exam is survival. On the German side, half a kilometer from the factory, a Wehrmacht officer corrects fire. "Target! Exit from the assembly shop! High explosive! Rapid fire!" The shells land in a cluster. Earth flies up in fountains. One of the shells hits the track of the tank that just drove out. The machine jerks, turns, and freezes. Smoke pours from the hatches. "Done!" shouts the gunner of the German gun. "Direct hit!" But the joy lasts exactly 10 seconds, because from the same gates, driving around the burning hulk of its predecessor, drives a second tank, and behind it, a third. This breaks the psyche. The German soldier is used to fighting a finite number of enemies. He knows there are so many machines in a battalion. If you knock out 10, fewer will remain. But here this logic does not work. Here, arithmetic is powerless. You destroy a tank, and the factory immediately spits out a new one. It is like fighting a hydra. In place of one severed head, 2 new ones grow instantly, and they bite immediately. The dialogue in the German trench is saturated with sticky fear. "Hans, I see a column. They are coming right out of the workshops." "How many of them?" "I don't know. I lost count at the 12th. They don't end. Where do they get so much iron? We bombed the substation." "They don't need light to kill us. Load sabot. Faster, before they break through the flank." Tanks go into attack from the wheels. Literally. They do not have a full ammunition load. Shells are loaded right in front of the gates. Crates are passed by workers in oily overalls. Sometimes the workers themselves get into the tanks. Those who assembled the transmission now pull its levers. Those who calibrated the sight now look through it at German helmets. This is industrial surrealism. German infantry sees not just military equipment driving at them, but the industry of the Soviet Union itself. The roar of tracks merges with the roar of presses that continue to work in the depths of destroyed buildings. While the forward edge of the defense fights, 100 meters back, in the shop, a milling machine operator turns apart for the next tank, ignoring the whistle of bullets stitching through the tin walls. In Stalingrad, the concept of equipment resource disappears. A tank lives not in hours, but in minutes. But these minutes are enough to fire, crush a machine gun nest, and give time for the next tank to come out of the gates. This is a conveyor of death working in real time. Losses are huge, but the flow does not dry up. German reports of that time are full of bewilderment. Russian tanks appear as if from under the ground. Their technical condition is terrible, but their quantity suppresses any tactics. The enemy encounters total war for the first time, where there is no division into front and rear. The whole city is one big mechanism of destruction. In the summer of 1942, under the walls of the STZ, the German war machine begins to stall. Its gears get clogged with meat and iron. Paulus's elite divisions, which marched through all of Europe, get bogged down in this flow of raw armor. They burn hundreds of machines, but new trains appear on the horizon. A tank without paint, in grease and soot, becomes the symbol of this stage of the war. This is no longer a beautiful duel of technologies, like in 41. This is a dirty, brutal brawl in an alley, where the winner is the one with the heavier brass knuckles and who is ready to endure pain longer. Soviet roughness reaches its apogee here. Why paint a tank if it will burn in an hour? Why install headlights if the battle is during the day? Why seats if you can sit on a crate of shells? Utilitarianism brought to absurdity becomes efficiency brought to the absolute. The enemy's template is completely broken. They expected the Russians to save their last reserves. Instead, they got an avalanche. An avalanche of hot, freshly welded steel that knows no pity and no fear. And in this roar, in the smoke of burning Stalingrad, the German soldier begins to understand. This war cannot be won by shots, because every one of their shots is answered by a factory whistle announcing the birth of a new avenger. The armor is still warm. The weld hasn't cooled yet, but the death this tank brings is icy. The conveyor doesn't stop. The duel continues, but now the initiative passes to those who are capable of making weapons faster than the enemy can reload their guns. 1943. The Kursk salient. If you look at this field from the height of an attack aircraft's flight, it seems like a giant scrapyard. The horizon is obscured by greasy, oily smoke that even a strong wind cannot disperse. Here the earth is soaked with metal so much that compasses go crazy. It is a graveyard of equipment stretching into infinity. The Battle of Kursk and the meat grinder near Rzhev are no longer just battles. This is a war of total attrition. These are scales, on one pan of which is German quality, and on the other, Soviet repairability. And the pan of the scales begins to inexorably tip toward those who know how to rise from the dead. A German general in his dugout reads a report on enemy losses. The numbers are astronomical. According to his calculations, Rotmistrov's tank army should have ceased to exist yesterday. The Russians lost hundreds of machines. The fields are strewn with their burning hulks. By all laws of military science, this is a rout. The unit must be withdrawn to the rear for reformation for at least 2 months. But 3 days pass. Just 3 days. And intelligence reports, Russian tank corps are in position again. Strength restored to 80%. The general throws his pencil at the map. This is impossible. This contradicts logic. Where did they get tanks? Do they drop them from the sky? Grow them in the ground? The answer is not in the sky, but in the mud of no man's land. As soon as it gets dark, strange shadows crawl out onto the field, still smoking from the day's battle. It is not infantry. It is repair squads. Technical triage. Men in oily, padded jackets, with faces black from soot, crawl to the knocked-out machines. They have no weapons except gas torches and welding machines. Their enemy is not the Germans, but time and the weight of metal. Here stands a T-34. Its side is pierced, the turret is jammed, tracks are torn. For the German army, such a tank is an irrevocable loss. It needs to be evacuated by tractors to the deep rear, to a factory. But the Soviet system works differently. Repairmen inspect the machine's wound. Through hole in the engine compartment, wheezes the senior one, shining a flashlight into the hole. Diesel hit? No, went higher. Radiator's torn. Vasya, drag a sheet from that burnt one. Cut a piece. We're welding a patch. We solder the radiators. By morning, it must drive. A gruesome surgery begins. Right in the field, under the whistle of stray bullets, An oxy-fuel torch cuts the armor of a dead tank to transplant it to a living one. Welding sparks in the night are an excellent target for snipers, so they weld covered by a tarp, choking on poisonous smoke in a confined space. The Soviet tank is designed so that it can be fixed with a sledgehammer and cursing. Road wheel smashed? We take one off a neighboring corpse, put it here. Gearbox jammed? Remove the cover, throw out shards of the gear, pour in oil, close it.
Does it rattle?
Yes. Does it vibrate? Yes. But it drives and shoots. Now let's look at the German side. Here stands a tiger, the mighty, invulnerable tiger. It has just one road wheel broken, but German engineers, in pursuit of ride smoothness, applied a checkerboard suspension. Road wheels overlap each other in several rows. To replace one inner wheel, 4 outer ones must be removed. In conditions of a muddy field, under fire, without a special crane, this is impossible. The Tiger crew sits near their intact, formidable but immobilized machine and cries from powerlessness. They know, if they retreat, this tank will have to be blown up. 60 tons of high-tech steel, half a year of factory work, millions of Reichsmarks turn into a pile of scrap because of one part that cannot be replaced in field conditions. The dialogue of German technicians is full of despair. "Hans, the crane won't come. The bridge is destroyed. We can't abandon the machine. Only a road wheel is broken. The cannon is whole. The motor works. Order to retreat. Set a thermite charge in the breach." Damned Russian mud. Damned engineering. German equipment dies once. Soviet equipment dies and rises multiple times. One and the same T-34 can be hit 3 times in a month. 3 times it is dragged from the battlefield by tractors. 3 times the holes are welded shut. The blood of the crew is washed out from the inside. New people are seated, and it is sent back. The Germans call them zombie tanks with horror. They see scars from their own shells on the armor of advancing machines. "We killed it last week. I remember that hit on the turret. Why is it here again?" This is a war of resources where repair logistics are more important than gun caliber. Soviet repair battalions return up to 70% of knocked-out equipment to service. That is hundreds of machines a day. It is an entire tank army that does not require production, but requires only welding and spare parts. At Kursk, this difference in philosophy becomes fatal. German divisions melt. Every lost Ferdinand or Panther is an irreplaceable loss. Waiting for replenishment from Germany takes months. The railroad is overloaded. Partisans tear up tracks. But Russian regiments are replenished right on the spot. Factory brigades arrive at the front in whole trains. They bring with them finished engines, transmissions, cannons. A field workshop looks like a branch of hell. Mud knee-deep, mixed with engine oil and grease. People don't sleep for days. Faces are grey, eyes red. Heavy parts are carried by hand, using levers from scraps of pipes. "Come on, heave!" men yell, driving a torsion bar into place with blows of a heavy hammer. The ringing of metal drowns out the cannonade. There is no fine-tuning here. Here the law of brute force operates. "Did it fit?" "It fit!" "Turn the nuts while it's hot." An hour later, the tank, jerking and sneezing smoke, crawls away toward the front. On its side is a fresh seam, not yet painted over, shining silver on a black background. This is the victory of the doctrine of simplicity. The Germans created a weapon for an ideal war where there are supply bases, cranes, and time. The Soviets created a weapon for a real war. For a war where mud clogs all cracks, where there are no spare parts, and the mechanic is a former tractor driver who knows how to fix equipment with what he found under his feet.
In thousands of Wehrmacht reports of that period, one thought runs through. We destroy their equipment, but their numbers do not decrease. This is a feeling of hopelessness. You shoot at a wall, the wall crumbles, but behind it, a new one grows. Even thicker, even rougher. Scrap metal on battlefields is not trash for the Soviet economy. It is a resource.
Special trophy teams collect everything. German tanks, their own tanks, wreckage of planes. Everything goes into use. German steel is remelted to make Soviet shells from it. The cycle of metal in the nature of war. By the end of 1943, it becomes clear the invincible German beasts, tigers and panthers, have lost. They lost not because they were weaker, they were stronger. But they were too complex for this world. They were prima donnas requiring care. The T-34 was an unpretentious soldier who could fight with a punctured lung and on one leg. It is these wounded, patched up, scary machines with rough patches on their sides that begin to drive the Wehrmacht to the west. The logistical noose tightens. The time of custom goods has run out. The time of mass resurrection has arrived. Summer 1944. The Belarusian swamps, which German strategists considered impassable for heavy equipment, begin to tremble. This is not an earthquake. It is resonance. Thousands of diesel engines idling in forest masses create a low-frequency hum that vibrates water in puddles and shakes down pine needles. Operation Bagration has not yet begun, but the air is already electrified with the tension of millions of horsepower ready to break off the chain. If earlier a Soviet offensive was a dam break, now it is a global flood, an industrial tsunami. Along the railroads to the west go not separate trains, but a continuous ribbon of transporters. Intervals are reduced to the limit of safety. Dispatchers at stations do not sleep for days, letting this endless stream of metal pass. On open flat cars are new T-34s with 85 caliber guns. Turrets have become larger, barrels longer. These are no longer the workhorses of 41. These are predators that have grown fangs capable of penetrating the frontal armor of tigers. In German headquarters, ominous silence reigns. Maps on officers' tables turn red from the number of marks of Soviet units. Intelligence reports a concentration of equipment that boggles the mind. This is a mistake. A German colonel nervously wipes his monocle. It is impossible to gather so many tanks in one sector. They won't have enough fuel. They have fuel, Herr Colonel, the adjutant replies quietly. They have everything. They laid fuel pipelines along the bottom of lakes. They built corduroy roads through swamps in one night. It is not an army. It is an anthill that has decided to sweep us away. And the dam breaks. On June 23rd, the horizon flares up. Artillery preparation of such density that the landscape changes beyond recognition. And then comes the steel. German machine gunners, accustomed to cutting off infantry, see a wall of armor before them. Tanks come not in wedges, not in columns, they come in an avalanche. From edge to edge of the field of view, only green turrets with red stars and white air identification stripes. In this phase of the war, the quality of German equipment finally loses meaning in the face of Soviet quantity, multiplied by increased skill. A Tiger can destroy 5 T-34s, but 20 drive out at him. While he turns his heavy turret, aiming the gun at one, 3 others are already flanking him. This is a pack of wolves hunting a bear. The bear is strong, but the pack is infinite. In the rear, at the command post, Soviet generals look at the map. Now their dialogues sound different. The nervousness of 41 has disappeared. The tension of 42 is gone.
A cold, calculating confidence of foremen has appeared, who know exactly how many bricks are needed to build a wall, and they have a mountain of these bricks. Front Commander Rokossovsky stands over a map lined with blue and red arrows.
Conrad Commander, they report a shortage of shells in the forward units of the Corps, a communications officer reports. Rokossovsky doesn't even turn around.
Tell the Corps Commander, let him not economize. Trains are standing for unloading. Let them hit area targets. Let them plow up every bush. We have more metal now than the Germans have land. Yes, sir, not economize. More metal than land. This phrase becomes the motto of 1944. Soviet industry has reached the peak of its power. Factories evacuated in 41 have grown into the Ural earth, overgrown with new infrastructure, and now work like a perfectly tuned mechanism of destruction. Every month, the front receives thousands of new machines. Losses are no longer a tragedy. Losses are just statistics, a column in a report, which is immediately covered by new deliveries. The German Army Group Center, the backbone of the Eastern Front, ceases to exist in 2 weeks. It does not retreat. It is ground up. It is pulled under the tracks of this steel armada. Roads are clogged with abandoned German equipment. Panthers stand without fuel. Ferdinands abandoned due to breakdowns. The great German machine stopped because it ran out of resources. And past these monuments to German engineering genius, clanking and spewing clouds of blue smoke, thousands of Soviet tanks rush to the west. At this moment, the psychology of the war changes. The Soviet tanker stops feeling like a victim. He feels the might of a giant industrial empire behind his back. He knows, if he gets hit, his crew will transfer to a new machine tomorrow. Look, Serega, how many of them? The loader shouts, looking out the hatch on the march. To the very horizon. That's power, brother, the commander replies, adjusting his headset. Now we will crush them not with skill, but with weight. We'll just smear them. By January 1945, the correlation of forces becomes grotesque.
On the Vistula Oder direction, against a handful of fanatics and remnants of elite Wehrmacht divisions, stands a force that is physically impossible to stop. Near Berlin, the density of artillery and tanks per kilometer of front reaches such values that German soldiers simply have nowhere to hide their heads. A German Volkssturm member, an old man with a Panzerfaust, looks out from a basement in a suburb of a German city. He sees a street, and the whole street is clogged with steel. Heavy IS-2 tanks, Joseph Stalin, with their monstrous 122mm cannons, take down entire floors of buildings with one shot. The shells of these monsters tear turrets off German tanks, along with the turret ring. This is no longer a war of machines. This is a beating. They don't end, whispers the old man, lowering his weapon. God has abandoned us. This is not an army. This is locusts made of iron. German strategy, built on economy, precision, and calculation, shatters against the philosophy of redundancy. Why aim at an embrasure if you can bring down the whole house? Why bypass a defense node if it can be leveled to the ground with artillery and ironed flat by the tracks of heavy tanks? An industrial tsunami covers Europe. Berlin already feels the trembling of the earth. This trembling is the work of thousands of presses in Nizhny Tagil, Chelyabinsk, Sverdlovsk. They continue to stamp out death, not reducing the tempo for a second. The inertia of this flywheel is such that only the Pacific Ocean can stop it, or the total capitulation of the enemy. In Zhukov's staff car, which is moving toward the German capital, a gramophone plays quietly. The marshal looks out the window at the endless trains floating past with tanks covered in canvas. "Transmit to Moscow," he says to the adjutant, not taking his eyes off the window. "Let them prepare a salute." and let them tell the factory directors. They have already won their war. Now it's up to us. The avalanche has approached the beast's lair. The steel doors slam shut. There is no exit. The mathematics of victory completes its proof. Autumn 1944. Headquarters of the Supreme Command of the Army in Zossen. Here, in deep concrete bunkers protected from bombs by a multi-meter layer of earth and steel, silence stands. It presses on the ears harder than the roar of cannonade on the Vistula. Here there is no mud, no lice, no smell of burnt flesh. The air is conditioned, purified, and sterile. Staff officers walk silently along carpeted corridors, passing folders marked "Top Secret" to each other. But in their eyes, emptiness. Colonel General Heinz Guderian, creator of the German tank forces, the man whose theories of blitzkrieg once brought Europe to its knees, sits at a heavy oak table. Before him is not a map of combat operations. Before him is a consolidated report of the Imperial Ministry of Armaments. This document is more terrifying than any Soviet tank attack. It is the mathematical proof of the Reich's death. Guderian takes the sheet. The paper is thick, expensive. The typewriter font is flawless, but the numbers typed on it scream. 79,000, he says aloud. His voice sounds hollow in the wood-paneled office. Opposite sits the chief of the operations staff, Alfred Jodl. He does not raise his eyes from his papers, but his hand with a pencil freezes. What did you say, Heinz? 79,000 tanks. That is how many the Soviet Union has produced in the last 3 years. And us? We made 27,000. Guderian throws the report on the table. The sheets fly apart, disturbing the perfect order of the staff chancellery. 3-1 in absolute numbers, Alfred. But on the main directions of attack, the ratio reaches 10-1. We didn't lose this war on the battlefield.
We lost it in the workshops.
This is the moment of truth. The moment when the German military genius, raised on Clausewitz and Moltke, collides with a reality he despised. They believed that spirit conquers matter, that tactics are more important than logistics, that one German Tiger with an experienced crew is worth 20 Russian 34s. In a tactical sense, this was often true, but in a strategic sense, it turned out to be a fatal mistake. War moved into a phase where individual skill dissolves in the statistics of large numbers. Our reports from the front confirm, continues Guderian, standing up and walking to the map on which red arrows are already approaching the borders of the Reich. The Russians do not spare equipment. They use tanks as consumable material, as projectiles. We cherish every machine. We create repair bases. We evacuate knocked-out Tigers under fire. And they simply send a new train. Jodl takes off his glasses and rubs the bridge of his nose. He looks old and tired. The Führer is confident that the new wonder weapon will change the course of the war. Jet planes, new heavy King Tiger tanks. King Tiger! Interrupts Guderian, and unhidden bile sounds in his voice. Even heavier, even more complex, even more expensive. We make them 50 pieces a month. And the Russians in Nizhny Tagil make 50 tanks a shift. We are trying to stop a flood by building a dam out of crystal. Yes, crystal is hard. Yes, it is beautiful. But the flow of water will simply wash over it and smash it against the rocks. In this office, the collapse of an entire philosophy is happening. German strategy was built on the concept of quality weapons. The best steel, the best optics, the best engineers. It worked while the war was short. But when the war turned into a marathon of attrition, quality became a burden. Complexity became the enemy. The German tank required high-octane gasoline, synthetic oil, special additives, qualified mechanics,
and a huge set of special tools. The Soviet tank required diesel, a sledgehammer, and a guy from a collective farm who sat behind the levers yesterday. The German system was fragile. The Soviet system was oaken, primitive, but absolutely unkillable. Guderian walks to the window. Behind the armored glass is an autumn forest. "We laughed at their factories," he says quietly, as if talking to himself. "We called them primitive. We said they had low production culture. But look truth in the eye. This primitivism is their genius. They removed everything that hinders production. They created a conveyor of death. And us? We are still playing in a nightly tournament, polishing armor, while the enemy beats us to death with stones." Intelligence reports finish off the remains of hope. Ural factories are working at full capacity.
Power supply is not disrupted. The flow of raw materials is stable. This is a verdict. Hopes that the USSR economy would overstrain itself have collapsed. It didn't just not overstrain. It hardened like steel and gained inertia that is impossible to stop. The dialogue in the bunker turns to an analysis of causes. "We were mistaken in evaluating their engineering school," admits Yodel. "We thought Koshkin and Morozov were just copyists, but they understood the essence of modern war better than us. They understood that the best is the enemy of the good. Their tank lives exactly as long as needed to pay off its production. Our tank lives longer, but costs 10 times more. Economically, we are bankrupt." The silence in the office becomes deafening. It is not the silence of calm. It is the silence of a morgue. The generals understand. The orders they give to the troops, "Hold position, counterattack, stand to the death," are agony. The war is already over. It ended not when the Soviet soldiers stepped across the border of the Reich. It ended when the Soviet conveyor reached design capacity, and the German one choked in attempts to create an ideal. On the table lies a photograph of a knocked-out T-34. Rough seams and uneven casting surfaces are visible on its turret. Guderian looks at it with hatred and respect. "This ugly piece of iron defeated us, Alfred. Not generals, not commissars. We were defeated by rough, untreated mass steel. Factories defeated headquarters." The realization of defeat comes not through the pain of wounds, but through cold numbers. 27,000 against 79,000. This fraction is the epitaph for the Third Reich. The German engineering genius drove itself into a trap of perfectionism from which there is no exit. They created the best machines in the world for a war that no longer existed. And the Russians created machines for the war that was actually happening. Yodel takes a pen to sign another senseless order on the transfer of non-existent reserves. The nib scratches on the paper. This sound is like the scraping of a shovel digging a grave. "What shall we do, Heinz?" Guderian puts on his cap. His face turns to stone. "Do our duty to the end. The machine is launched, and it will stop only when the fuel runs out. Or the blood." He leaves the office. The door closes with a heavy, dull sound, cutting them off from the outside world. But they know. The outside world, consisting of the roar of tracks and the clatter of breaches, is already standing on the threshold. And this world speaks Russian. The arithmetic of war has completed its calculations. The answer is received. And this answer is not subject to appeal. It only remains to watch this bloody finale to the end, the script of which was written not in headquarters, but in the factory workshops of Nizhny Tagil and Chelyabinsk. May 1945. The silence that fell after the capture of Berlin is deafening. But the war has not ended. It simply changed form. Now, when the cannons have cooled, the battle of minds begins.
The battle of engineers, analysts, and historians. On proving grounds in Aberdeen, Bovington, and Kubinka, captured and Allied machines are disassembled down to the screw. In a hangar of a British research centre stands a T-34. Men in white coats walk around it. They do not look at it as an ally. They look at it as a technical phenomenon. Next to it stands a Panther. The contrast hits the eyes. The German machine is complex, elegant, overloaded engineering. The Soviet machine is a hammer. A British expert opens the driver's hatch of the T-34. He runs a finger along the edge of the armor. It is sharp, untreated. "God, look at this," he says to a colleague. "How did they even fight in this? There is not even internal lining. The welding is so rough you could scratch yourself. The levers are stiff." Next to him stands a captured German designer. He was brought for consultations. He looks at the Briton with a tired smirk. "You look at comfort, sir, but look at the transmission. Yes, it makes noise, but it can be fixed in the woods. Look at the diesel. It is aluminium. We didn't have that much aluminium. They did." "But the build quality," the Briton grimaces. "Build quality doesn't matter when there are 10 of you against 1. This machine is not transport. It is a projectile, and it hit its target, while our Panthers remained beautiful scrap metal on the roadsides." The world begins to realize the terrible lesson of this war. Victory went not to the one who created the most complex machine. Victory went to the one who created the most technological machine. The T-34 changes the very concept of quality. Previously, quality was considered durability and precision. Now, quality became simplicity, repairability, and mass production. Pentagon and British War Office analysts write reports. The conclusion in them is singular. The Soviet Union created an ideal platform for total war. Designers Koshkin and Morozov, without knowing it themselves, laid down principles that 20 years later would become the basis of the world economy. Principles of extreme unification. Principles of rejecting everything superfluous. Principles where the best is the enemy of the good. Look closely at the history of post-war industry. You will see the shadow of the T-34 in the most unexpected places. Wolfsburg, Germany, Volkswagen factory. The assembly line for the Beetle. The same philosophy. Cheap, simple, repairable. No excesses. A car for the people, like a tank for the soldier. German engineers, having survived the collapse of their complex military equipment, learned the lesson of the brutal Russian school. To conquer the world, now economically, one must make not an elite product, but a mass one. Japan. Toyota factories. The lean manufacturing system. The fight against waste. Exactly what they were doing in evacuation in Nizhny Tagil when they removed 900 extra parts from the design. Soviet necessity gave birth to genius minimalism. The Japanese raised it to an absolute and named it their philosophy. But the roots of this philosophy lie in the frozen workshops of the Urals, where every extra hour of machining a part costs someone's life. A dialogue between two historians of technology decades later sums it up. Is the T-34 the best tank of the war? If looking by dueling characteristics, no. The Panther was stronger, the Tiger was more powerful, the Sherman was more comfortable. But if looking by the criterion of cost efficiency, yes, it is the absolute champion. It is the Kalashnikov assault rifle on tracks. What is its main secret? That a teenager could make it, and a collective farmer could fix it. German equipment could only be made by masters. In a war of attrition, masters run out first. Teenagers grow up, and collective farmers learn. The Soviet school of tank building proved utilitarianism is not poverty. It is the highest form of engineering thought. Any fool can create the complex. Only a genius can create the simple. The T-34 remained in history not just as a weapon of victory, but as a symbol of the triumph of reality over ambition. We return in our thoughts back to those workshops. Now perhaps it is quiet there, or there are new CNC machines. But the walls remember. They remember the grinding of metal, the smell of burning, the cold that cracked skin, and that inhuman rhythm. Teenagers who stood on ammunition crates to reach the handles of machines performed a feat equal to the front line. They did not shoot. They did not go into bayonet attacks, but it was they who broke the Wehrmacht's back. They won the duel of conveyors. They proved that the will of a people, multiplied by simple steel, is harder than any Krupp alloy. Their names are not written on the armor. They wrote, "For the motherland," "For Stalin," "Avenger" on the turrets. But every track link, every bolt, every weld seam is their autograph. The autograph of a generation that knew no childhood, but which saved the future. When you look at a T-34 on a pedestal, do not look at it as a monument. Monuments are dead. Look at it as frozen motion, as a clot of energy that was born in agony, went through hell, and emerged victorious. Its rough armor is the skin of war. Its cramped turret is the concentration of will. Its simple diesel is a heart that beat in unison with the heart of a huge country. The German Tiger today is a museum exhibit, evoking admiration for its complexity, like an antique clock. The T-34 is living history. A machine that is still in service in some countries.
A machine that defined the look of the 20th century. The shadow of this rough Soviet steel covered the century. It showed that in a critical moment of history, it is not the one who is more beautiful, richer, or more refined who survives. The one who survives is the one capable of clenching their teeth, discarding everything superfluous, and doing their job. Fast. A lot. And to the end. It was a dry, masculine conversation. A conversation about iron and blood. Without tears, without pathos, only facts. And the main fact remains unchanged. When the world was collapsing, it was held on the edge of the abyss not by ideal mechanisms, but by the rough hands of workers and simple, reliable steel.